Oh, you again. Whatever's the matter? No, I can tell. You need me more than ever.
Wow, my headset is cold. What's up everyone, I am Mont, and did you figure out who we'd be talking about this week? From the oh so subtle clue I gave in the last episode. Well, I'd hope so, because it wasn't actually subtle at all, was it? But yes, if you worked out the Chester quote, congrats to you. This has been an episode I've been looking forward to make for quite a long time. I think it was probably for the best that I got some practice and experience in with the others first, because there's a lot to talk about today, and it's one of my favourite subjects. What binds Lautrec, Oswald and Chester? What do all three have in common? Why, they all hail from the dark land of Carim. And what do we know of Carim? A little and a lot. That's to say, whilst we never visit it, we never see any pictures of it, and we don't even know how large it is or whereabouts in the world it is, we have many items coming from Carim. A few characters and more information than even Logan will know what to do with. Before we talk about Chester and the others though, let's talk a little about the land itself, shall we? I want to visit each and every area, from Astora to Xena, but perhaps the one that I'd most like to visit, not actually me. I don't want to go to anywhere from Dark Souls, because I would just die and go hollow in 2 seconds, but in game, the one I'd like to visit the most, and the one that intrigues me the most, is probably Carim. A dark and rainy place, that's how I envision Carim. Near a fantasy version of London is how I picture it. You know, cobbled streets, twisting, turning in their cities, oil lamps and buildings placed seemingly at random. A dreary vision of early 19th century London. If you've played World of Warcraft, there's a city in there which is a little like how I imagine Carim cities might be, Gilneas. I actually stopped playing WoW in 2007 before Gilneas was, in the game, but, well, the world of Warcraft was ever my favourite part of the game. I enjoy exploring, whether it's Warcraft or Dark Souls or anything else. I enjoy exploring a lot. Indeed, a near Victorian London's how I personally imagine Carim, quite apart from the city we see in the opening cinematic, which I mentioned in an earlier video, maybe the Solaire one, and I think I suggested it was Astora, but I've honestly forgotten because I have a terrible memory. But it is known that Carim is an earldom, or at least we know there is an Earl of Carim. Not sure what an Earl is? Don't worry, not many people really do know what it is, but to break it down into a very simple hierarchy, it might go somewhat like this. The Emperor is highest beneath God, and rules several kingdoms. A king rules a kingdom. Beneath the king you have dukes. Beneath the dukes you have the marquis. Below the marquis you have the earls and counts. Beneath those you have the viscount. And beneath the viscount comes the baron. Beneath the baron comes the knight. Beneath the knight comes the peasant. You with me? You following that? Okay, good. So it goes Emperor, King, Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, Baron, Knight, Peasant. That's a very simple way of looking at things, and it gives you an idea of how large Carim is. And want to know something interesting? The Earldom of Chester was one of the most influential and powerful earldoms in England. The Earl of Chester was often the title granted to the heir to the throne. In modern times it's basically the same thing as the Prince of Wales. Charles, Prince of Wales, is the heir to the United Kingdom. In other words, he is the Earl of Chester. I don't quite expect him to be invading anyone just yet though. And when related to Dark Souls, it provides some rather interesting evidence to back up a certain theory, which we'll talk about in a moment, or 10 or 20. Right, so we've covered what Earls and Earldoms are, and hopefully you all now have an idea what that means if you didn't already know. And we've spoken a little about what Carim could possibly look like. That's just my idea. How do you envision Carim? Well, you're not actually here right now, and if you were I'd probably be a bit disconcerted, but leave a comment and tell me what you think Carim looks like. Or better yet, draw a picture of what you think Carim looks like. I can't draw, otherwise I would. And now let's move on to the Knights of Carim. I actually had a PvP character I set up as role-playing a Knight of Carim. He wore the basic Knight set, not the Elite Knight set. Used a rapier and parrying dagger with a... You know, I don't think I've ever said this word out loud before. Shotel. 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 How on earth do you pronounce that? I don't know, let's just say Shotel. No, Shotel? That's gonna bug me. Anyway, so he had a rapier, parrying dagger, Shotel and crossbow as his secondary weapons. Of course, I set him up with the Carim rings, you know, red tier stone and the bite rings. And we only meet one Knight of Carim in the game, Lautrec. And he is far from a conventional knight, shall we say. But then again, what does Lautrec use? A Shotel and a parrying dagger. Both weapons associated with Carim. This dagger is useful after parrying and is normally equipped in the left hand, a favourite of the Knights of Carim, who are famous for fighting without a shield. We find the parrying dagger in New Londo, by the way. Also, parrying dagger is essentially a another thing I'm not sure how to pronounce, a main gauche, goosh, douche. But yeah, it's basically is what the parrying dagger is in game. It is something that you would use in your left hand to deflect and parry attacks. And I got kind of distracted waffling on about weapons, as I do, because I'm not gonna lie, I have a bit of a thing for bladed weapons. It's not a fetish, I swear, but you know, I just like them. They look so very pretty. But what were we talking about? The parrying dagger, which we find in New Londo, and then the Shotel, curved sword with sharply curved blade, created by Arstor, Earl of Carim, requires great skill to wield, but evades shield defense to sneak in damage. What can we make of that? Carim knights are sneaky? Do they fight with honor? Do they mock other knights with their shields? See, shields are very important to knights, and not just because they protect them in battle. They would hang their shields outside of their tents and pavilions during tournaments, and often have their shields would be used to identify them. For example, let's say two armies meet on the field of battle. Peasants, you know, who cares about peasants? You just stab peasants and run them over with your horse. Okay, run them down if you want to be correct. But yeah, peasants, no one cares about them. But a high-ranking knight, you can get a good ransom for that. Why kill someone if you can just beat him down and then sell him back to like his family or his house, whatever? So if you notice a guy with a lion on his shield and you go, oh, isn't there this knight from a household? Isn't there a Lannister with a lion on his shield? Then you capture him instead of killing him and you ransom him for a hefty sum. But the Knights of Carim do no such thing. They don't have shields. What does that mean? Does it mean they don't take prisoners, or does it simply mean they don't identify themselves in battle? Or does it mean they just think shields are dumb and they prefer, you know, to fight like a fencer? Not that Lautrec really fights like a fencer. He just kind of waddles around holding his parrying dagger up to block, and then does his fat rolling at you, but yeah. Either way, it would kind of go against Lautrec, who stands out and seems very proud of his armour. I mean, the moment you see him, you know who that is. There's only one person with armour like that. And, well, there's only one person in Dark Souls. We don't know if his armour is unique and other people have it, but, well, I'm going to assume that he is the only person with armour like that. Anyway, to move on, the Shotel... that is really bugging me. Is it Shotel or Shotel? I'll keep saying Shotel. Anyway, it also gives us a glimpse at Arstor, a man who created both the Shotel and the Purging Stones. He also played a role in the creation of the Bite Rings. Poison Bite Ring, one of the infamous Bite Rings commissioned by Sir Arstor of Carim. I almost said Sir Arsehole then. Despite the dreadful rumours surrounding its creation, this ring is an unmistakable asset in its ability to help prevent poison. Curse Bite Ring and Blood Bite Ring have the same description, just swap out poison with curse or bleeding. What I find most interesting about these is that they refer to Astor as Sir and not Earl. As far as I'm aware, you would call an Earl, not Sir. If you were addressing him, you would say, my lord, not Sir. Maybe before he was an Earl, he was a knight. Could it be that he replaced the prior Earl? Considering how cautious the man seems to be in commissioning rings that guard against poison, curses and bleeding, maybe there was some assassination plot going on that he feared, or maybe he was just a very cautious man. A number of items mention this Earl. Do we meet him in game? Yes, I believe we do. If you've played the DLC, then doubtless you've come across Marvellous Chester. Now, when Dark Souls first came out in September and October 2011, the limited edition came with an art book, and in that art book we have a familiar looking figure. See, why is Chester in the art book that came out with the original game when he didn't show up until a full year later in the DLC expansion and PC version, the Artorias of the Abyss and Prepare to Die editions? Obviously it was just concept art. A lot of concept art is made for games, never makes it in the final product. However, sometimes they are like fully modelled and basically finished assets that get discarded for a variety of reasons. But seeing as Chester's design was made, that gives us two options. Firstly, it was just a concept idea without any story behind it. Someone just was thinking of an enemy and they came up with this, like a lithe version of the Fat Ministers with a big ass crossbow. Or it was explicitly designed to be in the game and cut. They designed his character, they designed Chester, the Earl, whoever it is, and then they cut him out. I mean, we do know Dark Souls was rather rushed to release, and that's the reason why the latter half of the game is much less polished than the first half. Everything up to Anor Londo is amazing. After Anor Londo, there's a lot of, well, there's less polish, let's say. But we also have the Sanctuary Guardian in this art book, and I believe the concept art for Artorias was floating around long before the DLC was announced, so they had Artorias' design down way before we actually ever met him. Damn you editing software, it just lost me about 10 minutes of recording, and now I'm so mad I want to punch a camel in the face. Now where was I? We were talking about stuff.
If you've something to say, then say it. Just don't say the wrong thing.
Anyway, to continue, we know that Chester could have been in the original game, and there are many items that make mention of Astor. Furthermore, it's highly likely that Chester is from Carim. For starters, he's using the sniper crossbow, which we know is used by Carim snipers. Second, his garb, the long jacket, is similar to what Oswald wears. And I know that isn't the best point, because Oswald is wearing the black cleric robe, which isn't actually associated with Carim, but with Velka. Yet, I thought I'd mention it anyway. But, that's fine, because the description of Chester's long coat gives us yet more evidence. Black leather long coat, worn by Marvellous Chester, a man of mystery lost in the past. This exquisitely sewn aristocratic suit allows its wearer to move in silence, lending well to stealth. You see? Aristocratic. If that doesn't scream Earl, I don't know what does. And yet more evidence comes from his hat. The wearer of this top hat cracks a dubious, permanent grin. The curse of Chester. Dubious. Just like the dubious Carim from the character creation. Incidentally, there's the obvious parallels with the Cheshire Cat, and there's a city in Cheshire called Chester. Finally, if you remember the Earl of Chester thing I mentioned earlier, well, Earl of Chester, Chester's an Earl. Ha ha, who knows? But why would he keep his identity a secret if it is indeed him? Who knows? Maybe he forgot who he was. Maybe the curse of Chester isn't just some flavor text. but a very real curse. I mean, if you think about it, Arster was making rings that ward against curses, so, well, it's something you gotta consider. But why is Chester in the past? Well, Manus snatched him there, he pretty much tells us that, but why did Manus snatch him? To answer that, you have to remember why Manus snatched us. We had half his pendant. Could it be that Chester too? But even if we assume we know where Chester came from, when did he come from? He remarks on the legendary Abyss Walker from the old tales, so he comes from a time, after the DLC. But does he come from a time before or after our timeline, the main timeline from the main game? When we look at his dialogue, he gives little away, the rascal. But you probably noticed he exclaims, "For Juniper's sake." I can't really think of much of what that could mean, but a little searching did come up with two things. Firstly, it seems to be derived from the name Guinevere, spelt in the traditional, more Welsh way of GU instead of, GWY, blah blah blah. So, maybe he's referring to her, but why Juniper? Could it be that in Carim, Guinevere is known as Juniper? Or maybe he comes from a time so far ahead of the main game that Guinevere's name's been forgotten, or because we know that she went somewhere else, and maybe when she came to this new place, she adopted the name Juniper. Who knows? But the other thing I found was Saint Juniper, the Jester of the Lord, sometimes called the Saint of Comedy. Now, Jester of the Lord, I only thought that was relevant, perhaps because, jesters are, well, let's just call them medieval clowns. Not medieval. And Chester's got a weird, clowny grin on his face, mask type thing. That was about the only relevant things I noticed. However, when he notices that we destroy Artorias, he remarks,
Did you really slay Knight Artorias? I'd heard the Abyss found him first, but even still, that's absolutely treacherous. Yes, magnificently so.
Clearly, he isn't disturbed by what we've done. I mean, he almost seems to congratulate us. What do you think? Is Chester Arster? Did he slay the Earl and take that title for himself? Chester seems to know what is going on in Ulasil.
Believe it or not, Ulasil has brought the Abyss upon itself, fooled by that toothy serpent. They upturned the grave of primeval man and incited his ornery wrath. What could they have been thinking?
How exactly does he know that? And why does he seem to have some misgivings about Elizabeth? Or, as he calls her,
the bloody mushroom!
And when you look at his garb, doesn't it make you think of Victorian fantasy aesthetics? Quite unlike anything else in the game. Could he come from the future? Not sci-fi, and not modern era, of course, but I mean, when I say the future, I mean a time after the main game. Doesn't mean it has to be spaceships flying around, but whatever. Chester is the type of character, though, that gives me the impression he's behind everything. Why does he know what's going on? Why does he invade us? Most of all, if he really did have a hand in things, why does he fall so easily? That is, of course, assuming that we really killed him for good. But, this episode's starting to get long, and I haven't even started talking about Oswald or Lautrec. Lautrec, Lautrec, Hortrec, Star Trek. But, so we'll leave that for next time. Until then, so long. As usual, let me know in the comments what you think. How the hell do you pronounce Shotel? And is Chester Arstor? And most importantly, not most importantly, most interesting for me, what do you think Carim might look like? But yeah, until next time, ciao.
We'll be seeing each other, if you survive your travels.